One of the highlights of this year's Melbourne Documentary Film Festival is a film called To Thank the Room. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the director of the film, Belinda Lloyd, and the owner of the erstwhile Arts Hotel, the Brooklyn building, Maggie Fooke. Welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Now, this is such an interesting film because it looks at the last weeks of the hotel. But Maggie, what was your plan about buying this arts hotel in Fitzroy in Melbourne and to have people living there?
Well, the idea came about after after the purchase of the hotel, which I bought with another person, thinking we'd just live there. I had a teenage daughter, she had 2 teenage kids, and it was going to just be a group house. And after a year or so, she said, I'd like to sell, I'd like to move out. And I thought, I don't want to do that. So what am I going to do? I need to raise the money. I took out a huge loan and bought her out. That's the short version. So what am I going to do with 9 rooms and a garden and dining room? And I loved living in group houses. And I think our generation might be heading back towards group houses. So the idea of having an accommodation for people interested in what I was interested in made a whole lot of sense to me. So I'm interested in the arts. So it was, I called it the Brooklyn Arts Hotel with an S. So it wasn't visual art. There was, and I Googled at the time, there's only one other art hotel that I found, which was the one in Hobart, the Henry Jones Art Hotel. And that was totally about art on the walls. But I wanted something where we could talk about art or talk about the arts, philosophy, community, social issues, all that sort of thing. And that's how it came about. The days before Airbnb, the days before it was just a spreadsheet with the bookings on it, and all done by phone, and the simple version of accommodation. So it was there for a long time.
Yes. How long overall did you own it?
Asking me these questions, I think it must be maybe 15 years. That's what I put in my head anyway, about that long.
Okay. So, such an interesting hotel, which I didn't know much about, but this documentary taught me a great deal, which was great to see. So, Belinda, let me ask you, at what point did you get involved to direct the last weeks of the Art Hotel?
Arts, Peter.
Arts Hotel, yep.
I lived across the road from the Brooklyn Arts Hotel, and actually was quite intrigued and took the opportunity a couple of times to stay in the hotel itself, even though I had a home across the road. And so I was on Maggie's emailing list. And when the hotel was set to close, Maggie sent out an email saying, I'm selling the building, the hotel's going to close, and there's going to be a film. So I immediately emailed back, and it just happened to be at a time in my life when I decided to dedicate more of my energy to filmmaking. Again, I'd studied in the past, made some short films, been distracted by life and family and working for a living. So I emailed back and I said, fantastic, love the hotel, love to be involved. I just live across the road. I'll be coffee runner. Or any kind of other supports or odd jobs, and then it became clear during the process of filming and Maggie filling the hotel with events and guests and people coming and going, saying goodbye, and needing to empty out this massive building of furniture, etc. It became very clear that Maggie wasn't going to be able to produce and direct the film entirely, and that if it was going to be made, I would need to take it over. So that's what I did.
Okay. So Tell me about the collaboration between the two of you. How did you plot out, if you like, what was being filmed and all the guests and all that sort of thing?
Belinda.
Well, I have lots of documentary footage of Maggie yelling my name, saying, "Quick, come and film this," while I was filming something else. We had a fantastic and really rich collaboration. So there was a lot of, I mean, Maggie is such a fascinating, interesting and interested person. So that really translated, you know, her interest in these conversations really translated into, well, what are we making and why are we making it, and you know, what's valuable and what's interesting and what are the good stories and what stories do we like. And so there were lots of late nights sitting up in Maggie's kitchen drinking wine and reviewing what we'd shot that day and wondering what the directions were going to be. And much like the way that the hotel, Maggie ran the hotel itself, it was very organic. And that's super risky in terms of filmmaking because, you know, it can become unwieldy very easily. However, we did approach the whole thing very organically. And there were many sort of 2 o'clock in the morning, me saving and double saving files and trying to organize them into some semblance of a narrative. And then, of course, the narrative really emerged in the editing stage, and the conversations between Maggie and I and our editor, Larry Lawson, continued then. What is this film about, you know? And it started off, we were very interested in how people navigate change and how people navigated the process of saying goodbye, you know, the guests saying goodbye to this beloved institution. But it became very clear to me, and Maggie was somewhat reluctant about this, that the story really was Maggie's story. How did she say goodbye to this beloved institution? And she really led the way in her very original and heartfelt way of navigating that process. And I think that made a really interesting film.
Look, it certainly was. I was quite fascinated, especially by the various people who lived there, and I was always intrigued as to anyone who said they didn't want to be in the film, or Maggie saying, "No, don't film this, but film that," or that sort of thing. I'm always interested in the process.
Well, I was quite a bit more grab bag than Belinda in my original idea of it. I was just going to film and see what I got. But as Belinda says, it became impossible. There was too much going on, and that would have made a different film anyway. But Belinda has, I think she says, 120 hours, might be even more, of material. So in the end, the film's 71 minutes. So, you know, for every minute, there's another hour. And that's that sort of documentary, isn't it? And the headache of editing, which Belinda and Larry did, was, of course, a gigantic job. Just, you know, 2 weeks' work just looking at the footage was that sort of film, you know. So some great stuff that couldn't go in, some great people that could have been on the screen. However, it does really represent, you know, that the time and the feeling at the hotel, and how does someone say goodbye to their business, their work? You know, I was always thinking other people are in the same boat at this stage of their life. They have to stop doing what they were doing. It happened to be my job and my house, you know, at the same time. So,
well, I'm glad you mentioned the editing, because, as you said, so much footage was shot, and I gather there were at least 2 cameras involved. How did you make those decisions about what stayed in the film and what had to be deleted?
I had a little chuckle to myself when Maggie said it was 2 weeks of looking at footage. Maggie wasn't there. Sorry, Maggie, but it was a lot longer than 2 weeks.
No, just to look at the raw footage, I meant.
Yeah, sure. Even then, yeah, just over and over. So there was a lot of sifting through. Like Maggie, I like a really organic process. So there were a lot of notes with pencil and paper all over my lounge room floor for about 2 years, actually. Yeah, and yeah, it was a very challenging distillation process because we'd gone in with this approach of just capturing everything that we could from the 100 days and then see what we've got. It was a considerable process, and we actually did have a couple of edits happened before this one, and some other editors involved, and then it became clear that because Maggie and I had been sort of so heartfully involved in all of this process, we really did want to make it the story that emerged from our conversations. So it's quite an unorthodox film in that sense. The first edit of the film was a pretty classic 3-act story about packing up a hotel. I'm glad that we took an unorthodox approach, and it's exciting to have a chance to share that and have the conversations around how that lands for people.
I think, Peter, that's interesting to me, that I thought the best way to make this film is to ask somebody that has never been to the hotel to edit it and to see how they represented the hotel. And as Belinda said, it came as a fairly classic documentary, looking for issues and maybe conflict and all that. With that much material, of course, you could make many films. So yes, and everyone's going to pick up the material and make a different film, I think. And but in the end, Belinda said, I'd like to cut it my way. It's not the film I was making. And so we went with Belinda and Larry editing it. So, and I'm glad we did.
Yeah, no, it's really quite fascinating. Maggie, I'm intrigued with your arts hotel, and you said 9 rooms. That sounds right. What was the range of people that you attracted to the hotel, and how did they contribute to the overall feeling, I suppose, of your place?
Well, we tried to select guests in a diplomatic way. So often the best way, of course, is word of mouth. They were friends of friends, and sometimes people even met each other some time later around the table. We had one common table, breakfast table, so everyone sat at the table, and there was discussion. And often at that time, my memory was great, and I could remember everyone's name. And I had a little cheat sheet in the kitchen, so I could remember the names. And I'd introduce Beryl to Fred or Mary Ann to Susie, and they just start talking. So, and I could just go back to the kitchen and do whatever I was doing. I wasn't orchestrating conversations. But the other thing that I think a couple of people at the staff farewell brought up was that we definitely didn't want people that were in Melbourne for sports events. So if anyone said, I'm coming for the grand final, we'd say, we're booked out. Or tennis, or Grand Prix, or, any of that. So gradually, I think the place self-selected after a few years, started to select its own people. However, saying that, there is one person that is in the cut, a woman, Indian woman, who happened to follow, what's his name, Belinda?
Roger
Federer around the world. So just followed Roger Federer, and she came with her sister, and for some amazing reason she got through my net and was one of the most charming guests we had. So you can't pick it. People used to say, I like cricket, and I'm interested in the arts. okay, you can come. It's a bit like that.
It looked like for quite a long period of time you had full houses. You were pretty much booked out,
Mm.
which in itself is fantastic. But were there ever any occasions where you had a guest who perhaps didn't quite fit in?
Look, there were always nutters in the house, you know. I don't remember to pick out one. That would be hard. Lots of interesting people. People that left things behind that for the house. One fellow left a guitar which he covered in permanent text or writing. Another guy wrote a song, put it on his CD. There were all sorts of great people, and every now and again, I used to collect homeless people at one stage, and so I'd say I've got a room, especially in the garden, if you like to stay for, come and wash your clothes and that. That was an interesting time because homeless people are often very suspicious of being offered a room. And I thought, if it's in the garden and it's a hotel, it might be a little bit less like being asked to go into someone's house, What sort of nut is going to ask somebody to come to their house? So I had some great experiences with doing that. And even just talking to people in a sit in Burke Street and there's homeless people in Melbourne, of course, lots of them. So yeah, I could ramble around for a while, but that's probably it. Gives you an idea. There's comings and goings, A lot of people stayed there over the years.
Yes, of course. As you say, it was around 15 years, which is quite an incredible period of time. Yeah, fascinating. So, Belinda, once you have the final cut locked off, how was the film screened? I mean, obviously to Maggie, of course, but did any of the other guests who had been there see the final cut as well?
Well, thankfully, we had an emailing list for all the former guests of the hotel, which we still have. So people have been really cheering the project on, and because people have come from far and wide. Most people didn't actually live in Melbourne, of course. I think I was a bit of an outlier living across the road. So a lot of people are keen to see it online or have screenings sort of further afield. We also had a crowdfund to raise just the final post-production costs. So that was a really beautiful way also actually of just letting people know about the project and engaging people, I guess, being interested and involved in the magical thing that filmmaking is. And then part of that process was that we had a couple of screenings. We had a screening in Warburton where I was living and Larry was living, and then a screening in Castlemaine where Maggie's living now. And that was a thank you to our crowdfunding supporters and the those in the former Brooklyn community who were around have seen it, and we've got a lot more people to get the film out to and getting emails all the time. So we haven't quite worked out what that distribution strategy is yet, but we will.
Yeah.
in our usual organic way, Maggie and I will work something out. Yeah.
Well, the hotel was such an institution, and obviously a lot of people knew about it. So it'd be great for the documentary to be rolled out, apart from obviously the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival, where people will be able to see it. So yes, I hope distribution works out for you. So what's happened to this Brooklyn building, this arts hotel? What's it turned into?
Well, it was a bit run down, I have to admit, and it needed someone to take it to the next stage. It's a private house, and the older extensions. When the person before me, Damien and Trish, owned it, and they bought it as a rooming house. So it had been a rooming house for quite a long time. And Damien and Trish kept the people that were living there in rooms and until they eventually moved on or whatever, and they turned it into a sort of B&B for mostly for guests, people staying at the hospital, families of people at the hospital. That's the sort of earlier stages. I've forgotten my train of thought. What was the question?
Oh, just what has the building turned
What's
into?
happened to it? Okay, I turned it into a hotel that was more upmarket, unfortunately, in some ways, but Fitzroy changed in the time I was there quite dramatically, and it's changed again. So it's gentrified to become a private house, and thoroughly renovated, beautifully. But however, it lost. Even when I first took it over, I was worried about painting over all the remnants of the previous pipes and mistakes and spills and cracks and paint peeling, and all of that was very charming. And there was a point when I had to decide how much does one renovate, and lose that, and how acceptable is it to someone coming to stay to have paint peeling off the wall, which I actually love. But this time around, it's a very, very smart house.
Uh-huh. And now, Maggie, you're living in Castlemaine. Are you running another arts hotel there?
At the time, yes, when Belinda was filming, I didn't know what I was going to do, although I had been renting a house in Castlemaine for a couple of years. So I had a place to go when I left the hotel. That was the whole point of having a sort of stage. And the Northern Hotel in Castlemaine had been owned by Nick Datner, who was a Melbourne person, and he'd done fabulous renovations to the building. All the hard work that needed to be done on the other hotel was already done. And I think he'd had me in his sights for some years. So, and he used to stay at my hotel. So eventually I decided, COVID came, and then I decided, I think I'll stay in Castlemaine. So I bought the hotel. So Nick was great at fixing hotels, but he didn't want to actually run it. And so I liked running it. And so it wasn't exactly in my mind, because when you make a big change to your life, you can actually do almost anything. And I was wondering, maybe I'll go and live in another city, or maybe go anything. So we'll see.
Sounds like the prospect, Belinda, for you and Maggie to collaborate to make a follow-up film.
Maggie keeps threatening it, Peter.
Do I? This one's called this one's called the Northern Arts Hotel in Castlemaine, and Castlemaine's quite a place for people like us. I've got to say, it's a great exodus from Melbourne coming up here, and of course to other country towns on the railway line. It's a very attractive option.
Yes. I know a fair bit about Castlemaine, and I think John Flowers is an inhabitant of Castlemaine. He might be
I'm
good one.
In an hour and a half, I'm about to go and pick John up, because every Sunday we pick John up, and we show free films on Sunday. So this new hotel has a bigger space, the space that I never had at Brooklyn, where we can have music, and we can have workshops, and we can have films. So we've got a little cinema at the Brooklyn. See, I'm constantly making that mistake. At the Northern, so this week, for years, John has been choosing a film every second week, and introducing him quite often, every week at least. And it started out being John Flowers. When he turned 80, it was John Flowers' top 10. You probably remember people were asking his top 10. Eventually we said, let's screen your top 10. So we did screen top 10, and then we screened the top 20, and then top 30 and top 40. So he could go on forever. And it was wonderful having him, introducing them and talking about them afterwards. I have another film buff, another John Waldie, who introduces and chooses a film every second week. So it was John and John, John and John, John and John. And John Flowers now. And so he'll be here today for the arts film workshop screenings, which is an unusual one, all on film. Art film workshop work on 16mm and 8mm. So there'll be Richard Toohey coming, Hannah, Audrey Lamb, some of those young people that work with the arts film workshop. Jill Felix. Anyway, that's coming up at 2:30 today.
It's wonderful that your tradition is continuing and in fact expanding by the sounds of it. So that's at this Northern Arts Hotel in Castlemaine. Fantastic, fantastic.
Yes. So we have poetry. We have the Poeticas group meet here. We have a folk music group that meet here. We have a Celtic singing circle that meet here. We have a banjo group that meet here every week. There's quite a few different arts-related things as well as the occasional CD launch, book launch, and every week we have music. Yeah, so it's good.
It's excellent.
And we have 9 rooms as well here. As well.
What a coincidence!
fancy that.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see another film in the making. Okay.
Well, Belinda would have to move to Castlemaine for that. Just to live across the road again. Because, you can imagine making a documentary across the road from your site is pretty well asking for the perfect setup, isn't it?
It is. That would work out really well. Okay, I'm running out of time, but Belinda, I will just ask you, are you actually planning another film at the moment?
Very early days, Peter.
Right.
Yeah. So interested in ideas about Irish Australia and some more documentation of what that's been in this country and the Irish influence in Australia. So the very early days, gathering little notes and threads, and possibly something further with Maggie. The Northern Arts Hotel actually is, and I guess testament to Maggie's style, is organically of itself as well. It's very different to Brooklyn in lots of ways. It's its own community. It's in a different place with different people, and so it actually is emerging as a very interesting sequel. So we'll watch this space, I guess. Yeah.
All sounds very interesting. Yep.
By
Go on,
the
Maggie.
way, today is Bill Masulis's birthday. Did you know that?
I know Bill very well. Yes.
Yes. So that's why I mentioned it. I just happened to notice on Facebook.
Look, I'm impressed by all of this. So look, it's been wonderful talking to both of you.
Yeah.
So To Thank the Room is playing at the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival. We've been speaking to Maggie Fooke, who owned the erstwhile Art Hotel in Fitzroy, and to Belinda Lloyd, the director of the film. And it's been a pleasure talking to both of you. Thank you so much.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
Really is. Thank you, Peter.
All the best. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.